gone. Well, hello, everyone. We got off to a little bit of a slow but divinely orchestrated start here. A few technical issues, but I am very excited to present my guest, Dr. Mark Halpern. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and from Toronto, Canada, right?
Yeah, way up north and having fun.
So this is Messages from the Universe. And again, I apologize that we're a little delayed today, where we like to bring you different information and allow you and encourage you to use your critical thinking skills. And today, what we're going to be talking about is coherence, is heart-mind coherence. And this, I believe, will actually be some of the tools that are pivotal in being able to use our critical thinking skills well. So just a little bit about you, Doctor. So I understand you are a chiropractor. You're certified in HeartMath, and you're also a Ho'oponopono practitioner.
Yes.
That's super awesome. I do want to hear about that a little bit. And there was one other thing that you are qualified in that I'm not sure what that is, the
psychk.
And what is that exactly?
Psychk is short form for psychology kinesiology. I think they couldn't use the kinesiology part because it was taken or something, but so they called it psychk. But it's by Bruce Lipton and Dr. Rob Williams. And it's all about changing your subconscious belief patterns. And Dr. Bruce is really into epigenetics. He was one of the lead researcher on decoding the human DNA. And basically at one point, and everybody thought we were essentially ticking time bombs just according to our genetics. And he developed this entire, field of research of epigenetics, where we are not just what our genes say we are. The environment controls how our genes express themselves. And so psychk is a technique using muscle testing, and then another part of the technique called whole brain integration, which you can actually change your subconscious beliefs. So if you are someone that has problems with money, stress, pain, illness, what have you, if your belief systems are that you can't get better, then you've got to change those underlying belief systems. And that's what psychk is all about.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I was wondering about, and I should probably roll back before I ask too many questions, right?
Sure.
I do want to hear a little bit of your story and how you got into this, because I think it ties into what we're seeing on a massive scale in the population right now.
Yeah, I mean, my background is really 30 plus years of anxiety. That was my background. I started when I started feeling anxiety probably as a grade 6, grade 7, around 12, 13 years of age. And up till then, my childhood was loving, happy, I thought well-adjusted. But as teenagers start to develop sort of insecurities and go through puberty and all of the social interactions that go on, I just started developing anxiety and terrible mind racing that led to more anxiety. And these patterns of thinking and feeling just became so ingrained in my body. They became triggers. Year after year, it's almost like you're practicing anxiety, because as a teenager, you're not really aware of what you're doing, but you're cementing these really bad thinking habits, which affect your self-esteem. It affects the way you make decisions. It affects the way you interact with your peers. And for me, anxiety just grew and grew until in my 20s, I was in chiropractic college, and anxiety was still really bad. In my 30s, same thing. And so as I went through the decades, my approach, being sort of a scientific / holistic / spiritual person, my approach was to try everything and anything until that one time I found my cure for anxiety, and then my life would be better and everything would go back to being the way I envisioned it would be. However, what it ended up being was excitement followed by disappointment, because there was always a possibility, whether it was a energy healer, whether it was cognitive behavioral therapy, whether it was doing psychotherapy, whether it was naturopaths, homeopaths. I mean, you name it, I've done it. I've sat in rooms where people tried to, do past life regression with me and told me that I was in a war, 400 or 500 years ago. And I've also been in a psychiatrist's office where they want you to take and try different medications until your symptoms go away. And for me, none of it was the answer. I just tried things over and over and over and over for decades. And some things worked short term and then, didn't. But the pattern of thinking and the pattern of the way the thought patterns led to feeling in the body, led to chemical release due to the stress hormones, that just became more and more ingrained.
It's like a vicious cycle, right?
A complete vicious cycle, and it never ended, really. And so, in the book, I detail a lot of what I would do is do anything and everything I could, even though it looked dangerous, to get into the present moment. People always ask me, why did you enjoy doing things that caused other people anxiety? Whether it was jumping out of a plane or skiing off a cliff or scuba diving or all these really adrenaline junkie type of things. For me, it didn't cause anxiety because I was already anxious. Those things, I was already pre-anxious. So I didn't get more anxious for doing them. But what happened when I did those things was that it put me in the moment. And the only place that I felt absolutely no anxiety was in the moment. And so I really was on the lookout for anything that fully engaged me. And it could be a crazy thing, but it could also be something simply as getting in a good conversation with a patient or really getting into helping them. And that was, that was enough to put me in the moment. But so anxiety really became my set point. I didn't know how to get angry at anybody. I didn't get sad. I didn't get upset, really. It was always just anxiety, that pit of your stomach, as if you're about to go write your final exam, as if you're about to go jump off a cliff. That was my feeling always. And so I had to learn how to be a functional part of society while going through this fight or flight every day. And most people wouldn't know that I suffered with this. My family and friends who were close with me knew, but otherwise, no one else knew. And so I just sort of struggled through year after year, trying different things. And if I fast forward all the way to March of 2020, I'm in an office with 3 other chiropractors, and we had just done a renovation, and we came back to work on the 15th of March, got into the office and, turned on whatever was on the media, whether it was a TV or a computer. And we were shut down. We were locked down due to COVID. And it was like, go home, you're shut down, and we don't know how long you're going to be home for. It could be months, could be years. We had no idea what was going on. And so I went home and I realized this was not going to be a good situation for me if I just sat around every day. I knew that triggers would come up, financial and social, and just being locked in. And I knew my triggers would not be good with that. So I determined that I was going to create a good situation for myself. And so I literally went through every approach that I'd ever taken for anxiety, every book, every course, every therapist. I reviewed everything I'd ever done, all the books that had those little corners, pushed over that I was going to come back to one day. Well, this was the one day. I finally got back to it all. And I just started to evaluate what worked, what didn't work, what's part of my system, what I can get rid of. And I just realized at that point that I'm probably not the only one suffering with anxiety, and I'm probably not the only one feeling overwhelmed right now. And so I determined to write. And that's when I started writing the book, Coherence Revolution. And I just treated it like a job every day. I wrote for 6 months. And by the end of it, not only did I have a book, but I had an online course, which was 6 weeks. And the course is really not only to teach HeartMath, which for me has been a pivotal technique and tool in my toolbox, but also how to use your senses, how to use the world around you and the things that you can do to change your physiological response, to get into a state of coherence, which is balance, which is when your body is resilient, when you're feeling good, you're feeling inspired. How can you do that on a daily basis? What kind of process can I help people set up to be in that state? And that's how the Coherence Revolution was born. And we did our beta test last summer, and now we're launching in the winter with a few dates to do the 6-week course.
That's so awesome. And since you brought up the course and the book, I did bring it up on screen there for a minute. They can go to your what is it, Coherence?
It's coherencerevolution.com, but I've also set up a page. If you go to coherencerevolution.com/2022, so that's easy. They can get a free ebook. Anybody listening can get a free ebook. There's a code there that you can download it. And there's also a discount for the course, a 50% discount for our launch. And so anybody interested can certainly go there and get any information they want, and they can email me from there as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about, well, I do actually, one thing that stood out to me that you just mentioned, and I read it in the book, is that you even went to these healers. And one of the reasons I originally started doing healing work for myself and then sort of miraculously started to be able to assist others was because it was so much more rapid than traditional psychology and other forms of that type of inner work. But you mentioned you went to an energy healer that told you, oh, this is going to take a long time. Like, yeah.
I've been to so many different types of people, and this one woman, and beautiful woman, and she had good things to say. But I remember, I don't know if she was reading some kind of chart or reading my energy, but it was very clear to her that things were going to be good. However, there's going to be another, I think at the time it was like 2.5 or 3 years of not so good. And so, you're sitting there suffering. And in my mind, I didn't want to last 5 more minutes in this anxious state. And here she is telling me, it's going to be another couple of years. And so for me, it was like, wow, thanks for letting me know things will be good, but this can't be the answer of waiting another few years. And, I give an example in my book that I think is very powerful, because people say it can take months or years to get rid of anxiety. And I know for me, I can get rid of anxiety in a second if you're doing the right things. And I use an example in the book that has happened to me and many of my patients who I've spoken to, where you're at home and maybe you're crying, maybe you're overwhelmed, maybe you're anxious, maybe you're frozen, but you're in a state of stress. And the doorbell rings and you got a package or whatever it is, and you have to go answer that door. Well, you don't have time to do your therapy or do whatever technique it is to get better. What you do is you summon up as much energy as you can. You pull your shit together. You wipe your eyes off, whatever you do, straighten yourself up, you open the door. And for that 30 seconds or minute or whatever it is, you most likely have a smile on your face. You're speaking to whoever it is in front of you in a coherent way, and you're having a dialogue. And if you're honest with yourself, you probably feel better in that 30 seconds than you have in forever. But part of you wants to just shut the door so you can go back and break down, because the energy wants to take you back into that state. But we are capable of producing a response strong enough to overcome anxiety like that. And that's really what HeartMath has taught me, with using the breath work and visualization and using your emotional response. You start to practice the emotional responses that you want to have. And then instead of anxiety being your set point, you start being able to have different emotions become easier to attain. And that was really powerful for me, because no matter what's going on, you can change your physiological state if you do the appropriate things.
Yeah, I wanted to pull up an image that you have. So can you guys see that? Oops, where do and I always think of, I love heart mind coherence. Like, that was the greatest explanation to me, because when I always say, like, you need to get into alignment, I always do this. Like, to me, there's a visual to it.
Yeah.
And so can you explain this a little bit? Because I think that helps people to see what.
So this is actually a great diagram. If you look on the left, and it's very jagged where it says incoherence, that is generally a heart rhythm. And that is someone, just by looking at that picture, that's probably a chest breather, and it's very shallow. And just being a shallow chest breather is enough to set off a stress response. But if you look at the coherence on the right, it's a sine wave. And so if you picture your breath in being one side of it and the breath out being the other side of the wave, if you're breathing in a coherent manner, you start to develop this sine wave, which is a really rhythmic heart rhythm. And what's interesting is that the heart's rhythm electrically is about 40 times stronger than the brain. And so if you can get your heart rhythm into a nice coherent sine wave, you will start to entrain the parts of the brain that make decisions, that deal with pain, that deal with sleep, that deal with cognitive function. And so all of a sudden you start to have the heart's rhythm taking over the brain's rhythm. Eventually you can do the lung rhythm, the digestive rhythm, and literally all the cells of your body can be in this coherent rhythm. And when you are there, you feel it. It's not a concept. It's not something that is just theoretical. When you are in coherence, you feel it. When you have someone who's an athlete and they say they are totally in the zone. Well, in the zone means that they are in coherence. Everything is slowed down. They're more resilient. They're not in pain. They're feeling inspired. And that's what coherence is. And so you can attain this state by doing the proper things, but it's not about thinking. And what most people get the mistake of is they hear about the law of attraction, they hear about visualizing and using their visual, their imagination. And that's only a small part of it. It's really about the emotion. If you feel the emotion, then you start to entrain your heart and your brain. And so that whole fake it till you make it is actually a very good statement. If you can fake smiling, you start to release hormones that make you happy. If you can fake feeling energized and happy and inspired, you start to create those emotional chemicals. And so the idea is that even if you have to fake it, you're producing the emotion. And the more you produce the emotion, the more your body gets used to producing the emotion, your brain gets used to producing those chemicals, and it can become your set point rather than anxiety becoming your set point. Yeah. And so for me, although I haven't gotten rid of anxiety 100%, I still have triggers in my life from 30 years ago. But the idea now is I can identify them, I can get into a coherent state, and I can nullify that trigger simply by choosing a different emotional state and then getting there.
So do you think that some of those triggers can eventually be just dissolved entirely?
I believe that they can. I've had many that are no longer there, that are no longer relevant to my life. However, when there's strong ones that may have had to do with your parents, they may have to do with some really strong subconscious beliefs. In my life, and I can only speak personally, there are some triggers that I've gotten rid of, and there are others that have now just weakened to the point that they're not relevant for me. In other words, they don't scare me anymore. But if they've been deep-seated, they've been there for a long time. I've done hypnosis. I've done the subconscious, changing subconscious beliefs, and to some success with all of it. But have I been perfect? No. And so for the remainder of the triggers that are there, there's tools that can help you get into coherence. And when you're in coherence, you're resilient. And when you're resilient, you're not dealing with those triggers. You're actually able to, feel more positive emotions.
It's kind of at least a two and probably like a three-pronged approach, actually, right? Because the retraining of yourself is creating a new habit, and that's a crucial piece. And then by doing the other work, whether it's doing hypnosis or like I listen to affirmations or different types of hypnosis when I go to sleep at night. But but then if you are only thinking positive and you're also doing the habit, that doesn't necessarily change the subconscious belief, right? So you're working against yourself. So it kind of, and I might not be saying that very clearly. I hope I explained that well, but right? Like, so I think that this is obviously a really crucial aspect. And one of the things that I have a friend who I think she came to the realization, because I hear people say, oh, well, I have anxiety. Well, if you say I have anxiety, you've already, it's like assuming that it's a thing that you don't have any, that you're powerless to.
What's even worse, and I was guilty of this for many years, is not only I have anxiety, you start saying my anxiety, as if it's yours, as if you own it. It's a part of you, right? As opposed to I'm experiencing some anxiety in this moment. It's a whole different ballgame to be experiencing anxiety and to own it. It's my anxiety, as if now you've taken ownership of it. Right. And I was in such a habit of saying that. If people said to me, how are you doing? Oh, okay, my anxiety is bad today. Well, my anxiety is bad today. All of a sudden, it's this big part of me. And that took a long time for me to get rid of, because now when I talk about anxiety, it is an experience that I have, or I'm experiencing some of it, but it isn't me. Yeah. You definitely don't want it to be a part of you, because it isn't, right? Anxiety is, in most cases, just pent up, unused energy based upon fear. And, you know, most people, you're either anxious or you're depressed. And usually depressed is thinking about what's happened, and anxiety is thinking about what's going to happen, which is why I bring you back to my original point. Was the only place I didn't feel any of that was in the moment. Because if you were truly in the moment, not thinking about the future or the past, there's nothing to be anxious or depressed about if you can be in this moment. And so that's really, whether it's HeartMath, whether it's any other tool that you've got, it's really about bringing yourself back to the moment. And meditation is also obviously a great tool for that.
Hey, I want to highlight what you just said, though. That was a really great nugget right there. That right there is one of the great pivotal keys, I think, is you said, instead of claiming it as my anxiety or owning it, saying I'm experiencing anxiety, right? Like that's much more fluid, like, because I think we all experience anxiety at some different times in our lives, right?
Well, not only that, but my patients, everybody's anxiety is worse than anybody else's. You know, they come into my office and they are anxious, but not just anxious. The anxiety I'm feeling today is way worse than anybody else I know. And it's because people, they suffer. And so when you suffer, you want recognition. And the recognition is not just that I'm stressed out, because everybody's stressed out. So it has to be worse. And so people really, in their perception, it's that their anxiety is so much different than everybody else's. And it's just not the case. There's so many people suffering unnecessarily with anxiety. And if they knew how many people were in the same boat as them, immediately would reduce their anxiety, because they're not alone. And that's part of creating this community of Coherence Revolution. Is people, the only thing you need to be part of this community is someone who wants to better themselves and live a more inspired life, rather than, you know, letting anxiety or overwhelm or stress take over. And so you get people who really are looking for inspiration on a daily basis. And as soon as you start looking for inspiration on a daily basis, you find it. If you're not looking for it, you're not going to find it, right? So it's about awareness and keeping your eyes open. And, you know, do you want to go for a walk in a park, or do you want to go for a walk down Main Street? Because when you go on a walk down Main Street, that's just setting off fight or flight. When you go in the park, you're now getting more alpha in your brain, and now you're more relaxed. And so the idea is to start being aware of what can help you, what helps you on a daily basis to get into a coherent rhythm, and then start designing your life in that way. You know, in the book, I talk about having a process mindset rather than a destination mindset. And most of us are so afraid that we're never going to get there, and it's going to take so long to get there. Well, the fact is, if you set up a process that you follow every day with habits and tools and things that make you feel inspired and good and healthy, then if you fall off the bandwagon for a couple of days, you don't have to get there. You just have to hop back on your process and continue to do the things that are helping you. Because most people wait to be happy, right? I'll be happy when.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is like people are always putting the basics out in front of them as if they can't have it right now, right?
Right. No, I'll be happy when I get my first job, or when I get married, or when I get my, you know, my first kid, or when
they stop
buy my dream house
down in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. But meanwhile, you've lived 30 years and you're saying, I'll be happy when is the time to be happy? And the idea is to start creating a process in your life that makes you inspired and happy on a daily basis.
Can you break it down and give us some like really simple couple of things that we could do that are process oriented versus destination?
Well, sure. I mean, when when I wake up in the morning, I mean, I meditate, I do my breath work, even something as simple as that. I have some essential oils going that have specific smells that stimulate me to feel up. And maybe at night it's a different smell because now you want to be more relaxed. And so this is the purpose of figuring out what your process can be. And so in the course, what I do is I have people put together a daily time schedule, which some of you may have already done. I wake up at this time. This is what I do in the morning. This is what I do in the evening. I want to read at night. I want to have social time. I want to get my groceries done. You get your whole schedule done. But the next step for people to do is to look at this document that you put together and identify the emotions that you want to feel at certain times of the day. How do you want to feel when you wake up? What is the emotion at lunch? What's the emotion at work? What's the emotion in the evening? And now you start to say, how can I create those emotions? What smells, what visuals? Is there a sweatshirt that I wear that makes me feel relaxed rather than, is there an outfit I wear that makes me feel like I'm ready to go jogging? The idea is that you're using your senses, your sight, your smell, your taste, your hearing, you're using nature, and you're creating a process that's specifically designed for you. And so by going through, I take people through these steps so that they figure out what music is it that you want to listen to? What type of visual landscape do you want? Who are the people that you want to be around? What type of words inspire you? And what type of words really, make you, get away from them? So the idea is, for me, I've developed a process in my life where you would think it's regimented, but it isn't. I just have a huge toolbox. I know the foods that I need to eat when my blood sugar is down and my anxiety, if I have anxiety, my anxiety will go up in that moment, right? I have different tools that I'll use in the morning to help me elevate my mood. And one of those is HeartMath and meditation. I also make sure I exercise every day. It's just part of my process. And if I miss it for a few days, okay, no big deal. Just get back on your process. There's people that I want to speak to several times a week, whether it's just friends or family, because they ground me. And so the idea is that you want to have a toolbox of all these things that you can go to at any time. So if you don't want to be regimented, at least you have to know what you can do when these things arise. And so that's really what it's about, is doing the self-inquiry, right, so that you can figure it out for yourself.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I do think, there's a lot of books on morning routines and things like that.
Power hours.
What's that? Yeah, the power hour. And so I think that is kind of a good example of where people could get ideas, right?
Yes.
And in fact, in your book, it also had a good diagram on how the change in your body is when you have the feeling of appreciation.
That's right.
And so I don't know if I can flip to that one. Maybe not. All right. Well, I guess I thought I had it right there on hand, but can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's something, just like the doorbell ringing, that's a pattern interrupt. And if you can pattern interrupt yourself from being in woe's me and I'm a victim or I've been this or whatever, and just stop and be in appreciation.
So if you, I don't know if you could put up that diagram again, the one just with the heart, because HeartMath, the reason I was so attracted to HeartMath is they've done so much great research, and it's amazing. Before they even did the research, they knew these techniques worked, but they had to kind of reverse engineer it, because they started doing as technology got better. So they've got biofeedback equipment that you could be having a heart monitor on. And most people, if you put a heart monitor on and you just start watching your breathing, you will look like the heart on the left, jagged and not responsive. But as soon as you start to breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, you start doing some stomach breathing. And as soon as you can start to feel the emotion of gratitude or appreciation, your heart rhythm goes to a sine wave, just like in that picture. And when they finally had that eureka moment, when they were doing the research, I wasn't there. My partner, Bruce, who was actually a partner in Coherence Revolution, he was the first CEO of HeartMath. or he was, sorry, not the first CEOs, but he was one of the CEOs of HeartMath. And he was talking to me about when they used to do these, teach these, they didn't have the equipment yet. And then once they started seeing that, oh my gosh, look at the sine wave that's happening as soon as you feel gratitude. And so it's very interesting that when you start to feel gratitude, you know that your heart rhythm is actually changing into a more coherent rhythm. And the story I really like to tell about using HeartMath is with their biofeedback equipment. You wear it's like an ear sensor, or you can wear it on your finger, and it measures your heart rhythm. And when you are in coherence, it will beep, it will go to green, and it'll make this nice noise. And I remember it was about 10 years ago, I was sitting in my bed and I was anxious and I was trying to get into coherence. And so I was doing everything I could, and I was visualizing calm blue ocean and clouds and lying on a beach and anything I could to think of what would calm me or relax me, but nothing was working. And when you're doing that and you've got this equipment on, and now you're getting frustrated because you're not getting into a coherent state, everything's just working against you. And so I sort of took a second back, I took a step back, and I thought, what can I think about to get myself into a coherent state? And I remember at the time, my daughter was about 6 years old, and I visualized her jumping into my arms and giving me a hug. But I didn't just visualize the hug, I felt it. I felt her arms come around my body. I felt the warmth. I felt her kiss. I just felt it. And as soon as that happened, the technology went to green. Made this beep, and I felt like a whoosh come over my body. And it was the first time that I'd ever experienced what I would call physiological coherence. It was not, again, it wasn't just a theoretical concept. I felt it, and I was like, this is what it feels like.
And it's not just your mind and your heart syncing up. You're all this, like you were talking about earlier, all the cells in your body feel that rush, right?
You feel it. And the idea is to sustain that and to keep that inspiration going and to keep that feeling of gratitude and love. And when your heart becomes open and you start to feel it, it's addictive because you want to be in that coherent state all the time. And so really that was, again, as I said, about 10 years ago, that's really what started my journey with this equipment and with this technology and with this technique, because it changed. And in that moment, I realized I could change my physiological response in the moment. And that was very powerful, because when you're someone who suffers with anxiety, you don't think anything can help you. And I think as we sort of talked at the beginning, when you're in an anxious state, that's not the time to be making a good decision. That's not the time to be thinking about what your next steps are and how to get better and what is your next thing that you want to do. First, you've got to get coherent, get into a state that you can make a good decision, get into a better state that you can now talk to people about what is going on or figure out what your next step is. And so it's really all about creating an emotional response to get into a state of coherence.
So a couple things about that. So I do want to talk about something that I have to color like around the lines a little. So when all these mandates started to come down on people and they were having to make a decision on whether they were going to follow through on ingesting certain things into their bodies. I think that a lot of those people were operating on that left side, right, in the red state.
Lots of fear.
Out of lots of fear. And I've now since met several people that have regretted their decision, that are actually having complications and so forth. And I'm not saying either way about it. I'm just saying that no matter what decision you're making, I mean, that one's a very big one, but any big decision, if it's coming from that red fear state, it's potentially setting you up for something you're not going to be happy about later, right?
Well, this is what we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing on Facebook or on social media every day of people that are going to stores or going to social gatherings and acting and behaving in ways that they never would have behaved before. It's fear, and the fear is making people do and say things that they never would have before. And it's why really at this point, as much as you might want to either confront someone or really attack someone for what they're saying or doing. There has to be some compassion, even if you disagree with people and you disagree with what they're doing and their approach, no matter what side they're on. Everybody's suffering and people are not making their best decisions. And the idea is throw a little kindness out, because it's going to help you, but it's also going to help them. And perhaps they might make a better decision if they don't feel the world is against them.
Yep, kindness is cool and smiles are free.
Exactly.
So the other piece about this, I did want to mention, and I think you could probably take this ball and run with it, is when we're operating in coherence, I did see the HeartMath Institute studied where the heart actually emits more of a powerful signal, as you mentioned, 40 times more than the brain, but it emits it to the earth. And so I don't know exactly how that works other than it's like radio waves, right?
So it is, we all have an electromagnetic field and we can measure that electromagnetic field. It goes out several meters from our body. But HeartMath has done some really cool things. So I first became aware of it 10, 15 years ago, but they started doing research in the early 90s. And on September 11th, 2001, on that famous day when the planes sort of hit the building, HeartMath had researchers at different poles on the earth, in different stations. And what they were measuring was the Earth's electromagnetic field. Now, coincidentally, on that day, the Earth's electromagnetic field had a blip in it. And it was a blip at the frequency of the human heart. And what they theorized was that there were enough people looking, because there wasn't social media back in that time, really. There wasn't a lot of people on the internet at that point.
Right.
But there were enough people looking at their televisions. There were enough people sharing the same emotion of grief that it actually changed the Earth's electromagnetic field. And so in that moment, the Global Coherence Initiative was sort of started. And the Global Coherence Initiative is really trying to get enough people feeling the same emotion of love at the same time to try and change the Earth's electromagnetic field, with the theory being, if you can change the Earth's electromagnetic field, you can change global warming, you can change many of the things that are affecting our planet. And isn't it cool that they're talking about it coming from the feeling of love? And so for me, this really hit home because, you know, if you look at every religion on the planet and every spiritual teacher on the planet talks about how love can heal. So wouldn't it be cool if really what every religion was trying to tell us is that by feeling the emotion of love, we can actually save each other and the planet. And there's now active research going on to try and prove this, which I just think is fantastic. So when you talk about HeartMath and creating heart-brain coherence, it really works on 3 levels. It works on your own. You're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, then you can get yourself into a coherent state. I can do it. And HeartMath did this amazing experiment where they had sort of 4 cubicles. If you can picture there being sort of 4 different cubicles around something, and 3 people had a laptop where they were hooked up to the HeartMath stuff and they were practicing coherence. The 4th person was hooked up to the heart monitor, but was just instructed to do nothing. And literally within a couple of minutes, as the other 3 got into heart coherence, the 4th person's heart went into heart coherence because our electromagnetic fields are affecting the people around us. Yeah. And so HeartMath is really about yourself. It's about your community, and it's about the planet. And so it's really, for me, it's just, it's a great company to be involved with, but the technique, as I'm practicing it, you have this feeling that you're not only affecting yourself, but you can be affecting those around you.
So let's talk about that on the individual, and then the community, and then the planetary level. So on the individual level, what's really awesome about it is like I'm sure you who are watching, listening, having you ever walked into a situation and you're in a great mood, and so the people around you are friendly and people smile at you, versus like you're in a bad mood and you're sad and like everything's dreary and that energy field actually impacts your ability to not just have a pleasant experience, but also then, and you talk about all these areas in your book, like financially, emotionally, physically, health-wise. I mean, I'm missing it because I think you had like 7-10 different areas, right?
Yeah, we talked about just how incoherence can affect every aspect of your life, your subconscious beliefs, your finances, your career, all of it.
Because you're operating in this bubble of, if you get yourself into coherence, and again, that's something you can choose instantly just by going into some gratitude, right? Or visualizing hugging your child, or petting your puppy dog, or whatever brings you that kind of joy and love.
Right.
And like anytime I walk into a business situation, I visualize that person greeting me warmly, like wanting to shake my hand, like happy to do business with me, signing my contract, whatever.
Right.
So can you speak a little bit more to that on the individual level? And then I want to kind of talk about a little more about the community and globally.
Well, I know I now look at it almost like a superpower. And there's a few examples I like to use, but I encourage people to have fun with it. And what I mean by that is, I was out for dinner once, there was maybe 6 or 7 of us at a table, and the waiter was just in a terrible mood and was giving us very bad service, and really had done a few things at that meal that were kind of rude to us. And so, either I could have complained to the manager, or I could decide to do an experiment and have a little fun. And so what I did at the table, without anybody else knowing, I just got myself into a coherent state. I started practicing the breath work. But as I was practicing the breath work, I visualized myself radiating out the feeling of love towards the waiter, and just wanting to see if this is going to have any effect. And there was this one time, it was probably about 2 years ago, that I would say about 10 minutes later, the waiter came back to the table and said, I just wanted to apologize. I've had a terrible day. I realize I've been taking this out on your table, and I'm going to get this and this for you right away. And I'm sorry for the wait. And I thought to myself, this is quite the superpower I have here, because, you can affect those around you, on a much smaller scale. Just, someone is in a terrible mood and you go up and you give them a nice big hug, and it just disarms them. And either they'll just say, thank you, I needed that. I didn't even realize how much I needed that. Because we can share our energy with other people in many different ways, even just holding a hand, touching someone, visualizing them, and just sending them love. All of those things have a direct effect on other people.
Absolutely. I could go on with some great stories about that. So that's definitely another one to highlight. It's one of the biggest keys, I think. And as a matter of fact, the sending the love part is, it's in the book, The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity by Catherine Ponder. She talks about love. And then also, I think, I could be mixing the two up. So I'll probably have to quote it later, but basically there's a whole chapter on using love as a tool to transform, but also specifically in business. But again, so when anything goes wrong, or if somebody treats me in a bad way, I always tell people, if they've been hurt by something else, I'm like, oh, just send them love. Just send them love. Because that could be the case. That other person is probably in incoherence, right?
Yes.
And they're not operating from their highest version.
No, it's not. It's never about you. Yeah. It's always about them. And at the beginning, you mentioned Ho'oponopono. And Ho'oponopono was an ancient Hawaiian healing art. But at its basic, simplest form, it's thank you, forgive me, I love you, I'm sorry. There's 4 phrases. And the idea is that you're using those 4 phrases over and over. And they call it cleaning, where it cleans your, I don't know if you want to say your subconscious, your energy source, however you want to visualize it, but you're essentially cleaning whatever is coming into your observance. So if you see a plane crash, you didn't cause the plane crash. You're not saying I'm sorry because you caused it, but you're cleaning on it because it became as part of your awareness. So you are saying, thank you, forgive me, I love you, I'm sorry. And that's the basics of Ho'oponopono.
Thank
But
you.
yes, and
Thank you.
as I got into it, I love saying it. So just saying the words, thank you, forgive me, I love you, I'm sorry, each one of those can produce an emotional response. And so for me, it's less about understanding even what Ho'oponopono is all about. And it's more about getting people to say those 4 phrases for themselves and for others, because as you're saying those words, it brings about a positive emotional shift. So no matter what's going on in my life, I might just be sitting there talking to myself saying, thank you, forgive me, I love you, I'm sorry. And it's just because those words feel good to say. And when you say, I'm sorry, I don't care who you're saying it to, yourself or to someone else, it just feels good to get it out.
Definitely healing, no question.
Yeah.
And I actually practice something called, I'm a compassion key facilitator. And it's pretty amazing how often people really do get stuck on forgiveness, and without the understanding that when we forgive, we're really setting ourselves free, even if we have been, in our opinion, right? Because that's a judgment that somebody else might have wronged us.
That's right.
But how infrequently we've been giving compassion as well. So when we needed the compassion, when something might have been traumatic, and being able to hear the words, I'm sorry, it can melt you, right? That completely can open your heart. So
that's right.
That's good stuff. I love that. So let's take this to the broader perspective now. And, you know, this is actually quite a image, right? Because to the left, I think we have a very big contingent of people on the planet that are in that state. And I think that there's more and more people that are in coherence right now. And I don't know if it's 50-50 or what the tipping point is. But I think in order for us to continue to transform the planet, those of us that can continue to bring ourselves into coherence, right? Be the change we want to see in the world first.
That's right.
Then we can start doing these global meditations, or even just our one energy field transforming the person next to us. Or
well, I think that's it. First, as long as you start to take care of yourself, it becomes natural to start to share it with others. In other words, when you start seeing people that become more coherent, just by the very nature of being more coherent, more grateful, more in love, more vibrant, you want to share that. And it becomes natural. It's when you're incoherent that you're shut off from other people, when you're shut off from sharing yourself, when you're shut off from really sharing what you've got to give to the world. As soon as you start feeling coherent, you're lighter. And so you start to feel more resilient. You start to feel more passionate. And that's when you do share your love with others. It's when you might make the phone call to someone you haven't spoken to in a while, because yesterday you were bitter with them for not reaching out. But today you're coherent and you're like, I don't care why I didn't reach out. I miss that person. You know, and so the idea is that when you start becoming more coherent, the other emotions start to drop by the wayside. But it has to be very conscious. You have to be very aware of what you're trying to do. It is not natural for most people to think positively and inspired and be grateful. The world is a stressful place, and most people are taught the opposite, and most people practice the opposite. And so it's about becoming conscious and becoming aware and figuring out how can you do this on a daily basis? How can you create more love and inspiration and gratitude in your life? First, selfishly for yourself. And then second, you're just naturally going to share it with others. So I think if everybody just took a little time every day to become a little bit more grateful and share a little bit more love, it would go a long way.
amen. I do have other things I'd love to talk with you about, but I also know that because we got off to a late start, I think we're probably coming up to the end here.
Well, I'm happy anytime you want to have me back, or we want to carry on the
Yeah,
conversation. That's
I,
great.
I definitely would love to do that, because I want to talk about the self-inquiry and some things like that. So for now, why don't I just want to give you one last kind of plug here, give you a chance to mention your book and your course that you're offering.
Well, anybody that is listening today or in the future, if you go to www.coherencerevolution.com/2022. There you're going to find a code to get a free ebook, so you can get my book and start to read it. There's also a code if you want to do the 6-week live course. It starts January 31st, but there are some other start dates depending upon what time works for you. And it's just going to be a really great 6 weeks. They're about an hour and a half each, the course. You're going to learn heart math, but you're also going to dive into your own life and figure out what works for you and figure out how to create more coherence in your life. And so if that resonates with you, I would love to see you there. And you can always reach out and send me an email at support@coherencerevolution.com. I'm happy to get back to you. But otherwise, I hope everybody gets the book and takes the course and just becomes more coherent in their own life.
Yeah, well, and again, I always have said, I'm known as the joy doctor. I'm here on this planet to assist in the evolution of consciousness and bring world joy. Because awesome. If we're all living in joy, then there is no need for peace. We're already.
I love that.
We've elevated the conversation. So, all right. Well, thank you again.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Blessing.
Okay.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.